The sun was beginning to set over the small town of Spring Creek, casting long shadows across the dusty streets. It was a quiet evening, much like any other in the small Texas community. People were finishing up their day's work and heading home to their families. The air was warm with a light breeze that carried the scent of fresh hay and wildflowers. Clara stood on the porch of her small home, staring at the horizon. Her hands were folded over the railing and her gaze was distant, lost in thought. She had always loved the quiet of the evening, the peacefulness of the land that surrounded her. It had been her escape, her place to think and reflect. But today, there was something different in the air, something that had unsettled her. It had been 5 long years since she'd seen Jake, the cowboy who had once stolen her heart. He had left suddenly without a word, without a goodbye. She had begged him to stay, but he had gone just like that. No explanation, no reason. Just a broken promise and a heart left behind. And ever since she had learned to live without him, though it hadn't been easy. Clara had built a life for herself in the years after his departure. She had taken over the family ranch, learned to manage the cattle, and made sure everything ran smoothly. The pain of losing Jake had never fully gone away, but she had learned to carry it. She had even thought she might never see him again, that he was gone for good. But life, as it often does, had other plans. It had been a few weeks since the rumors started. People in town had begun whispering that Jake was back. At first, Clara had dismissed it.
She didn't want to believe it.
She didn't want to hear about him again. But the whispers grew louder, and soon enough, Clara couldn't ignore them any longer. Jake was back. He had returned to Spring Creek, and no one seemed to know why. Clara tried to avoid the thoughts of him. She had enough to think about with the ranch and the life she had built. But every time she heard his name, a knot formed in her stomach. She didn't know what to expect if she saw him again. Would he look the same? Would he apologize for leaving? Or would he just walk away again, leaving her with more questions than answers? As she stood on the porch, Clara's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a truck pulling up the dirt road. She looked up and her heart skipped a beat when she saw the familiar red pickup truck parked outside her gate. It was old, rusty, and had a few dents in it, but it was unmistakable. It was Jake's truck. Clara's breath caught in her throat. She felt a wave of panic wash over her. Her hands suddenly cold against the wooden railing. She wanted to run inside, to hide from him, to pretend that he wasn't there. But something stopped her. She couldn't look away. It had been so long since she'd seen him, and yet her heart recognized him the moment she saw his truck. Jake got out of the truck slowly, as though unsure of what to do next. He was taller than she remembered, his broad shoulders even more muscular from years of hard work. His face had aged too, the boyish charm replaced with a weathered look, his jaw covered in a few days' worth of stubble. But his eyes, those eyes were still the same, deep, brown, and full of memories. For a moment, neither of them moved. The wind blew through the long grass, rustling the leaves on the trees. It was as if time had stood still, and for a brief moment the world around them disappeared. Jake took a deep breath and began to walk toward her. His steps were hesitant, but he didn't stop. Clara stood frozen on the porch, her heart beating faster with every step he took. What was he going to say? What could he possibly say after all these years? When he reached the porch, Jake stopped a few feet away. He looked at Clara, his expression unreadable. But there was something in his eyes, something that told her he hadn't forgotten her. He hadn't forgotten what they had shared. "Clara," Jake said, his voice low and steady, though there was an edge of uncertainty in it. "It's been a long time." Clara didn't know what to say. She wanted to yell at him, to ask him why he left, why he never came back. She wanted to tell him how much it hurt, how much she had missed him, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she just stood there looking at him, her emotions swirling inside her like a storm. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you come back, Jake?" Jake's eyes softened, and he seemed to struggle with his words. He ran a hand through his hair, his face showing signs of guilt and regret. "I didn't know what I was doing when I left. I thought it was the right thing to do, but I was wrong. I should have stayed." Clara's heart ached as she listened to him. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that he was truly sorry for what he had done. But so many years had passed, so many unanswered questions. Could she trust him again? "You should have stayed," she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "You should have stayed and told me the truth." Jake nodded, his expression solemn. I know, I'm sorry for that. I didn't know how to face you back then. But I'm here now and I want to make things right. Clara felt a mixture of emotions, anger, sadness, and a strange sense of relief. He was here standing in front of her after all this time. But that didn't change the pain he had caused her. It didn't change the fact that he had left without saying goodbye, without giving her a reason. And now, after all this time, he was asking for forgiveness. She looked away, her eyes searching the horizon as if trying to find the answers she needed. I don't know if I can forgive you, Jake. I don't know if I can forget what you did. Jake didn't answer at first. He just stood there watching her as if waiting for her to decide. The silence between them was heavy, filled with years of hurt and unresolved feelings. Finally, he spoke again, his voice quiet but firm. I'm not asking you to forget, Clara. I just want a chance to prove that I'm different now, that I'm not the same man I was when I left. Clara didn't say anything. She just stood there, torn between the man she had loved and the hurt he had caused. She didn't know what to do, didn't know what to say. But one thing was clear. This was just the beginning of something much bigger. The days following Jake's return were filled with uncertainty and awkward encounters. Spring Creek, though a small town, had a way of buzzing with gossip. Everyone seemed to know that Jake had come back, but no one quite understood why. Some believed it was to start over, while others whispered that he had come back because he had nowhere else to go. The truth, however, was more complicated than anyone imagined. Clara tried to keep herself busy. She had work to do on the ranch, tasks that didn't care about past mistakes or the emotional weight of unspoken words. Yet, despite her best efforts, her mind kept drifting back to Jake. It wasn't just his return that unsettled her. It was the way he had looked at her with those familiar eyes that once held all her hopes and dreams. Now they seemed full of regret and sadness. She hadn't seen him since that first awkward encounter on her porch, and she wasn't sure what to expect if she did. She wasn't sure if she wanted to see him again, but it was hard to ignore the feeling that something was pulling her toward him, something she couldn't explain. On a warm afternoon, as Clara was finishing up her chores, she saw Jake's truck parked near the barn. She froze for a moment, unsure of what to do. Her heart pounded in her chest, but this time there was something different. This time there was no hesitation. She walked toward the barn, determined to face whatever conversation awaited her. When she reached the barn, Jake was standing by the fence, his back turned to her, as he stared out over the open fields. He was alone, and his posture seemed more relaxed than the last time they had spoken. Clara took a deep breath and walked toward him, her footsteps soft on the dirt. Jake, she called softly, unsure of what to say but knowing she had to speak. Jake turned around quickly as though he had been waiting for her. His expression softened when he saw her, and for a moment neither of them said anything. The silence was heavy, almost as if they were both afraid of the words that might break it. Clara, Jake said finally, his voice carrying a hint of warmth. I didn't mean to surprise you. I've just been thinking. Clara raised an eyebrow, feeling the tension between them. Thinking about what? Jake rubbed the back of his neck, looking uncomfortable. About us. About everything that happened. I know I can't just come back and make everything right. But I wanted you to know that I'm not the same man I was when I left. Clara didn't respond immediately. Instead, she took a few steps closer, crossing her arms over her chest. She could see the change in him, though she wasn't sure what it meant. There was sincerity in his voice, but could she trust it? I don't know if I believe that, Jake, Clara said softly, her voice tinged with hurt. You left without a word. You didn't even say goodbye. I had to pick up the pieces on my own. I don't know if I can just forget all of that. Jake's face fell, and he stepped closer to her. I never meant to hurt you, Clara. I was a fool. I thought I could protect you by leaving, that it would be better for you, but I was wrong. Clara felt a lump form in her throat. The pain of those years, the years spent alone, came rushing back all at once. She had tried so hard not to think about him, to build a life without him, but it hadn't been easy. She had loved him deeply, and his sudden disappearance had shattered her. It was hard to ignore the part of her that still loved him, even after all this time. You can't just come back and expect things to be the same, Clara said, her voice shaking. You left me with nothing but questions, Jake, and now after all this time you're asking me to forgive you. I don't even know where to start. Jake's eyes softened and he stepped closer still, his voice low and sincere. I don't expect forgiveness right away, Clara. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking for a chance to show you that I've changed. I want to prove that I'm not the same man who walked away from you." Clara looked at him for a long moment, her gaze searching his face. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust him again. But the years of pain and confusion held her back. She had built walls around her heart, walls that no one had been able to break down. Could she really let him back in? "I don't know if I can just forget everything, Jake," Clara said softly. "But maybe we can start with being honest with each other. I need to know what really happened. Why did you leave? And why did you stay away for so long?" Jake's face grew serious as he looked down, taking a deep breath. "I should have told you the truth from the beginning. But I was afraid, Clara. I thought I was protecting you from the mess I was in. My family, things were falling apart. I couldn't handle it, and I didn't want to drag you down with me." Clara's eyes softened, but her voice remained firm. "But that's not an excuse, Jake. You didn't give me a choice. You didn't even give me a chance to understand. You just left." Jake nodded, his expression full of regret. "I know, and I'm sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me just because I'm sorry, but I am. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to walk away, but I thought if I left you'd have a better life without me." Clara stood there looking at him, her heart a mix of emotions. Part of her wanted to shout, to demand more answers, but another part of her just wanted to understand, to find closure. She couldn't keep living with this pain, this confusion. She needed answers, and Jake was the only one who could give them to her. "I don't know if I can trust you again," Clara whispered, "but maybe we can start over. Maybe we can talk and try to make sense of all of this." Jake's face lit up with a glimmer of hope. "I'm not asking for anything more than a chance. I know it won't be easy, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to show you that I'm here for good." Clara nodded slowly, her mind racing. She wasn't sure what would come of this, or if she could ever forgive him fully. But for the first time in years, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward. And if nothing else, she owed it to herself to find out. The days that followed Jake's return were difficult for both of them. There were no grand gestures or dramatic confessions, just quiet moments where they both tried to make sense of the years that had passed. Clara had agreed to give him a chance, but there was still so much uncertainty between them. Jake wasn't sure if he could ever make up for the hurt he had caused her, and Clara wasn't sure if she could open her heart to him again. The work on the ranch kept Clara busy, as always. She had a lot on her plate with the cattle, the fields, and the daily chores. But this time she wasn't alone. Jake had asked if he could help, and though Clara had been hesitant at first, she reluctantly agreed. After all, he had been part of her life before, and his return had stirred up emotions that she couldn't ignore. Jake showed up early every morning, ready to work. At first, his presence was a little awkward, and Clara couldn't help but wonder if things would ever feel normal again. But over time, she began to notice something. Jake wasn't just working to earn back her trust. He was genuinely trying to be part of her life again. His hands were rough from years of ranching, but there was a tenderness in the way he handled the horses, the way he worked beside her without speaking much, as though he understood the space she needed. One afternoon, after a long day of work in the fields, Clara and Jake sat on the porch of her house, watching the sun dip behind the hills. Clara had always loved this time of day, the peaceful silence, the golden glow of the setting sun. It felt like the world was slowing down, taking a deep breath before the night came. Jake was sitting next to her, his eyes on the horizon. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air was warm, and the sound of crickets filled the evening. "I used to come out here just like this," Clara said softly, breaking the silence. "When things were tough, when I didn't know what to do, I'd sit out here and watch the sun go down. It made me feel like maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay." Jake turned to look at her, his expression thoughtful. "I remember you used to talk about the sunsets all the time," he said quietly. "You always said that the world looked different at sunset, that everything felt right, like everything had its place." Clara smiled faintly, the memory bringing back feelings she hadn't thought about in years. "I still believe that. The sun sets, but it always rises again. You just have to wait for it." Jake's eyes were full of something deep, something that Clara couldn't quite place. It was the same look he had when they were young, the look of someone who believed in something greater than themselves. But now it was tinged with regret, as if he were trying to figure out if he could ever make things right. "I wish I had understood that sooner," Jake said softly. his voice heavy with regret. "I spent so much time running away, thinking that I could escape my problems. I didn't realize that running just made everything worse. And I hurt you in the process. I'm sorry, Clara. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I want you to know that I'm trying." Clara turned her gaze back to the horizon, her mind swirling with emotions. She had always known Jake had a difficult side, a side that had always kept him from truly opening up. But now, as she listened to his words, she realized that maybe there was more to him than the man who had walked away without looking back. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet," Clara said quietly, her voice steady. "I don't know if I can forget the hurt you caused, but I do believe you're trying. And that means something." Jake nodded, a small but hopeful smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "I don't want to ask for more than that. I just want to be here with you and see if we can build something again. I know it won't be easy. I know it might take time. But I'm willing to wait if you'll let me." For a long moment, they both sat in silence, the sounds of the evening filling the space between them. Clara could feel the weight of everything they had both been through, the pain, the loss, and the uncertainty. But there was something else there, too. Something that felt like the beginning of a new chapter. It was a fragile hope, but it was there. Over the next few days, Jake continued to help around the ranch, working quietly beside Clara. It wasn't easy. The work was hard, and there were moments of tension, moments when the past seemed too close, too painful. But there were also moments of laughter, moments when they would exchange a glance or share a quiet joke. Slowly, the walls between them began to crumble, brick by brick. One evening, as they finished their work, Jake looked at Clara and asked, "Do you remember the day we first met? It feels like a lifetime ago." Clara smiled softly, the memory clear in her mind. "Of course I do. You were so sure of yourself. I thought you were a little too cocky for my liking." Jake chuckled, the sound warm and genuine. "I think I still am, a little bit. But you didn't seem to mind back then." Clara raised an eyebrow playfully. "I guess I didn't. But I was young and naive. I had no idea what I was getting myself into." "Yeah, well, neither did I," Jake admitted with a grin. "But I wouldn't change anything. Not the way we met, not the way we fell in love. Even though I messed it all up in the end." Clara felt a soft pang in her chest. She didn't know what the future held for them, but in that moment, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. A sense of peace. Maybe it wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was enough. "I don't know what will happen, Jake," Clara said, her voice quiet but steady. "But I'm willing to take it one step at a time. One day at a time." Jake's eyes softened and he nodded. "That's all I can ask for." As they stood there, side by side, watching the last of the daylight fade away, Clara realized that the journey ahead would be difficult. There would be bumps along the way, moments of doubt, and maybe even more pain. But she also realized that the most important thing was that they were both willing to try. And that was enough to give her hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. As the days turned into weeks, Clara and Jake slowly settled into a new rhythm. Life on the ranch continued. And though there were still moments of awkwardness between them, there was also a sense of quiet understanding. The air between them wasn't as heavy as it had been at first. It was still a little uncertain, but at least now it felt like they were both trying to heal, trying to rebuild, trying to move forward. Clara had always been the strong one, the one who carried the weight of everything on her shoulders. She had taken on the responsibility of the ranch after her father passed away, and for years she had handled it all alone. She had learned to be self-reliant, to not depend on anyone else. But with Jake back, something had changed. She didn't feel quite as alone as she had before. She could still feel the scars of their past, but she also felt the pull of something deeper, something that had always been there, her love for him. Jake, for his part, seemed different. He was quieter, more reflective, and more patient than the young man she had once known. The cocky confidence that had defined him in their younger years was still there, but it had softened. He no longer acted like he had all the answers, like he was the one who could fix everything. Instead, he seemed willing to admit his mistakes, to face the consequences of his actions. And Clara could see it, the sincerity in his eyes, the way he worked tirelessly beside her on the ranch, doing whatever he could to prove that he was there for the long haul. One evening, after a long day of work, Clara found herself standing in the barn, watching Jake as he carefully tended to the horses. The soft sound of hooves against the floor and the rustling of hay filled the air. Jake was so focused on his task that he didn't notice her watching him. Clara leaned against the wooden beam, her arms crossed over her chest as she took in the sight of him. He had always been good with animals, always had a natural way with them. It was one of the things she had loved about him. There was a calmness to the way he moved, a gentleness that she hadn't seen in him before. Jake finally noticed her standing there, and a smile tugged at the corners of his lips. "What are you doing just standing there?" he asked, his voice teasing but kind. Clara smiled back, though it was soft and uncertain. "Just watching you," she said, her eyes searching his. "You've changed, Jake." Jake chuckled, the sound low and warm. "I guess we both have," he said, stepping toward her. "I'm not the same person I was when I left. And I don't think you are either." Clara's smile faded slightly and she looked down at her hands. "Maybe not. But I still don't know if I can just forget what happened. I don't know if I can just erase the hurt you caused." Jake's expression grew more serious. He reached out, gently placing his hand on hers. "I don't expect you to forget, Clara. I don't expect you to just forgive me overnight. I know I hurt you. I know I broke your trust, but I'm here now, and I want to make things right. I want to show you that I'm different. I want to earn back your trust even if it takes time." Clara looked up at him, her heart beating a little faster. His words weren't just empty promises. She could see the sincerity in his eyes. He wasn't asking for her to forget. He was asking for a chance to prove that he was worthy of her trust again. "I don't know if I can trust you again, Jake," Clara said softly, her voice filled with a mixture of doubt and longing. "But I want to believe that you've changed. I want to believe that we can move past everything and start over." Jake gave her a small, hopeful smile. "That's all I can ask for. I'm not perfect, Clara. I don't have all the answers, but I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Clara's heart ached as she looked at him. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that they could start fresh, that they could find a way back to the love they had once shared. But the scars of the past were still there, lingering like shadows, and she wasn't sure if she was ready to face them again. For a long time they stood there in silence, the only sound the soft rustling of hay and the gentle breathing of the horses. The world around them seemed to pause as though holding its breath, waiting for them to make a decision. Finally, Clara spoke, her voice quieter than before. "I'm not sure what the future holds, Jake. I don't know if I can go back to the way things were, but I'm willing to try. I'm willing to take it one day at a time and see where it leads." Jake's eyes softened and he squeezed her hand gently. "That's all I ask for, Clara. One day at a time." As the days passed, they continued to work side by side on the ranch. Slowly, the tension between them began to ease and the bond they had once shared started to rebuild itself, brick by brick. It wasn't easy. There were still moments of doubt, moments when the past seemed too heavy to bear. But with each passing day, they both took small steps toward healing. Clara began to see the man Jake had become, the man who was willing to put in the work, not just on the ranch, but in their relationship. He wasn't perfect, and she didn't expect him to be, but he was trying, and that was something she hadn't seen from him before. One afternoon, after a long day of work, Jake and Clara sat on the porch of her house, watching the sun set behind the hills. The sky was painted with shades of orange and pink, and the air was warm and comforting. They didn't need to speak. The quiet of the evening spoke volumes. They had both come so far, and though the road ahead was still uncertain, there was something in the air, a feeling that they were on the right path. "I never thought we'd be here again," Clara said softly, her voice full of emotion. "I never thought we'd have a chance to rebuild what we had." Jake looked at her, his eyes full of hope. "I never thought I'd have a chance to make things right. But I'm here now and I'm not going anywhere." Clara smiled, a small but genuine smile. It wasn't the same smile she had worn when they were young, carefree, and in love. But it was a smile that said maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other, one day at a time. And for the first time in a long while, Clara believed that things might actually be okay. Maybe they couldn't erase the past, but they could build something new, something stronger, something more real, together. It had been months since Jake had returned to Spring Creek, and Clara could feel the changes in herself, in him, and in the space between them. The ranch had become a place of new beginnings where they both worked side by side, slowly but surely rebuilding what had been broken. There were still moments of doubt, times when Clara felt the weight of the past pressing down on her, But she no longer carried it alone. She had learned to trust Jake again, but not in the same way she had before. The trust they had once shared had been fragile, but now it felt stronger, earned through time, hard work, and a willingness to face the truth. Jake had shown her that he wasn't just the man who had left without a word. He was someone who had learned from his mistakes, someone who was trying every day to be better for her and for himself. It was a quiet morning when Clara decided to take a walk down by the creek. The sun was just starting to rise, casting a soft golden glow over the land. She loved this time of day when the world felt fresh, when everything seemed to hold a promise of possibility. Jake had gone to town for supplies, and Clara needed a moment alone to gather her thoughts. As she walked along the creek, the cool water rushing beside her, her mind wandered. It was hard to believe that only a few months ago she had been angry, unsure, and full of doubt. She had been afraid to open her heart to Jake again, afraid of being hurt, but now things felt different. The pieces of her life were slowly falling back into place, and though it wasn't perfect, it was real. Clara reached the old oak tree by the creek, the same tree where she and Jake used to sit when they were young. She touched the rough bark, her fingers tracing the familiar grooves. The memories of their past, the good times and the bad, rushed back in a flood. She remembered the way Jake had looked at her when they were first in love, the way they had dreamed of a life together. And she remembered the day he had left, the heartbreak that had torn her world apart. But now, standing beneath the oak tree, Clara realized something. The past wasn't something to be forgotten. It was something to be learned from. She had carried it for so long, but it didn't have to define her anymore. And it didn't have to define her relationship with Jake. They had both changed, and that was enough. As she stood there lost in thought, she heard the sound of footsteps approaching. She turned and saw Jake walking toward her, a smile on his face. He had a warm, easygoing expression, one that made Clara's heart flutter in a way it hadn't in years. "Clara," Jake called as he reached her. "I've got something for you." Clara raised an eyebrow, curious. "What is it?" Jake reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, weathered notebook. It was old, the leather cover worn and creased. "I found this in the attic," he said, handing it to her. "It's something I've been holding on to for a long time. Thought you might want it back." Clara took the notebook from him, her fingers brushing against his as she did. She opened it slowly, and her breath caught in her throat when she saw the pages inside. It was a journal she had kept when she and Jake were young, when they had first fallen in love. The pages were filled with memories of their shared dreams, their plans for the future, and the promises they had made to each other. "I can't believe you kept this," Clara whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I thought it was lost." "I never forgot about us, Clara," Jake said softly, his voice full of sincerity. "I never forgot about the dreams we had. Even when I was gone, I thought about you, about the life we could have had. I've made mistakes, but I never stopped loving you." Clara felt a lump form in her throat. She had spent so long trying to move on from the past, trying to forget the pain that Jake's departure had caused. But now, standing there with him, holding the journal in her hands, she realized that maybe it was time to stop running from it. Maybe it was time to face the past and to finally let it go. Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked at Jake. "I didn't know if I could forgive you," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "But now I think I can. I think I can finally let go of the anger and the hurt. Because I realize I've been holding on to it for so long, it's been keeping me from moving forward." Jake stepped closer, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. "Clara, I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know that. But I'm so grateful that you're willing to give me a chance. I'm not perfect, but I'm here, and I'm ready to do whatever it takes to make things right." For a moment they stood there in silence, the weight of everything they had been through hanging in the air. It wasn't a perfect resolution, and it wasn't an instant fix. But Clara knew that they were both ready to try again, ready to move forward. The past didn't have to control them anymore. Clara closed the journal and looked at Jake, her eyes filled with both sadness and hope. "I'm not sure where we're going, Jake. I don't know what the future holds. But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to see what we can build together, one step at a time." Jake smiled, his face full of relief and gratitude. "That's all I can ask for. Clara, one step at a time." They stood there together for a long while, just watching the creek flow by, the soft sound of the water a comforting reminder of the time that had passed and the time that was yet to come. The sun was beginning to set, casting a soft orange glow across the sky, and for the first time in a long time, Clara felt a sense of peace. She didn't know what the future would bring, and she didn't need to. For the first time in years, she was ready to let go of the past and embrace whatever came next. As she turned to walk back to the ranch with Jake by her side, she realized that sometimes, the only thing you can do is trust the journey, no matter how uncertain it may seem. And with Jake beside her, she felt ready to face whatever came next.